Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Classes Online. My name is Benjamin. Today's video is on analyzing non-African prose, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. That is the focus of today's video. If you are new to this channel, kindly subscribe to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button below. Click on the bell icon as well so that whenever a new video is uploaded on the channel, you will be notified instantly. Without much ado, let's dive into the lesson. First, we look at the title significance. What is the significance of the title? Invisible Man. The novel depicts the evil effects of racism and the related social and intellectual issues faced by Black Americans in the white-dominated American society of the 20th century. The title Invisible Man underscores the problem of lack of identity that faced a Black African in that society during the period in question, specifically in the 2030s. The narrator introduces himself as an invisible man. As he noted, he is invisible simply because people refuse to see him. The unwillingness of people to notice him highlights the gravity of racial discrimination faced by the Black Americans. It indicates the degree of disregard and degradation meted out to them by the white Americans. So the title Invisible Man uh, explores the meaning of the concept of invisibility. And here, invisibility becomes a metaphor for loss of identity. The individual Black American of that period lost his or her identity to the racist practice. In other words, you were supposed to be part of that society, but the society did not recognize you as part of it. So you were denied of all the citizenship rights, you were discriminated against, you were stigmatized, you were oppressed, you were degraded in different areas, all right? So that is the significance of the title, Invisible Man. The word invisible man, is a group of words which actually is a noun phrase as a grammatical structure, but then it's a metaphor for, the agonies suffered by the Black man of that period, that the individual Black man in the American society of the 1930s was treated as a non-entity, all right? Okay, so now let's look at the setting. It might interest you to know that setting is really about two major things. All right, let me try to see if I can. Um, all right, so setting is about two major things. Number one, place. All right, place. And then number two, time. And here, time refers to socio-cultural, political, economic background. All right. So that is what setting is about. Setting is about the place where the actions of a work of art are situated, and then setting is also about the time. As I have mentioned, it is set in the 1930s, you know. So the place here is America. The novel is set in America in the 1930s. And then we look at the period and the socio-economic or socio-cultural or socio-political background. What is the situation of things in at that particular period in time? Now, the events in the story begin in the American South, where the narrator is born and brought up, and then shift to a nearby Negro college. So here we are looking at the place, you know, because when we are looking at setting, we are also looking at what we call spatial setting, all right, spatial setting, and then we are looking at temporal setting. All right, that is another way of talking about spatial setting refers to the place, the geographical location. Temporal setting refers to the time, the socio-cultural, political, economic background, or the circumstances prevailing at that point in time, because these are the things that have actually inspired or influenced the writer to write the way he or she wrote. Now, the settings and the incidents narrated in the novel portray the agonies of the African Americans in the racist American society of the 20th century. So the 20th century, the time that this particular novel depicts the socio-cultural, socio-economic, the socio-political environment that this particular writer has captured with through the lenses of his writing. You know, we are characterized, you know, these were circumstances characterized by racism in the American society. This was a time when the Black Americans were, you know, subjugated, degraded, oppressed, and discriminated against racially on the basis of color, all right? So that is the background of the novel we're analyzing today. And so Invisible Man is about the agonies of the Black man in a racist American society of the 1930s, all right? So that is exactly what we are looking at right now. Okay, so let's actually erase this so that we won't get confused when we get to the next page. So we are going to look at the next item, which is overview. We want to have an overview of the novel. All right, let's shift this so that we can see clearly. All right, so that is exactly what I want us to look at right now. All right. The novel Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison uses invisibility as a metaphor for the degradation and inhumanity suffered by the African Americans in the racist American society of the period in focus. The story is told, all right? The story is told in a first-person narrative point of view by a nameless narrator. All right, so this is a typo, a nameless narrator, right? So uh, the invisible man, it might interest you to know that the invisible man, is a nameless narrator. That's why it's called invisible. It's not given a specific name. It's just called invisible, the invisible man. All right. So the narrator is the invisible man who recounts his experiences in form of dreams and memories using various flashbacks. So you can look at the novel, what it is, all right? We want to have an overview of different aspects of the novel, all right? The novel exposes the evils of racial discrimination against the black people, which rendered them virtually invisible within their own country. The story revolves around a nameless young man in a 20th century American society where the black people are so oppressed that the young black man can survive only through pretense. He has, of course, he can only pretend because he himself is confused about his identity. All right? And that's what racism does. It wreaks havoc on the psyche of the racially oppressed. All right. So then, according to him, that's the narrator, the invisible man, according to him, the people he comes in contact with see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination. That is what the narrator is saying. When he comes in contact with other people, they can't see him, they can't recognize him in his individual identity. To them, he doesn't exist. They are only conscious of their surroundings. They are only conscious of themselves. They are only conscious of the figments of their imagination. Of course, this refers to the white Americans in their self-centeredness, right? Because to them, the average black man doesn't really exist. He can probably exist only on, uh, when in terms of maybe uh, rendering some, some menial services. But in terms of a, an honored personality, someone accorded respect as a human person, it doesn't really exist, all right? So as a black man, he was invisible to them. When he moves from the racist South to New York City, the situation remains sad. It's the same sadness everywhere. At last, he resorts to a hole in the ground when which he makes his home. Of course, it is circumstances again that pursues him. He really, when he's escaping from being lynched, probably from being killed or being physically rough handled, then of course he falls into a manhole and there he remains underground. All right, so that is exactly the situation that the story is handling. All right, so let's erase this again so we can go to the next item and look at it. Now, this brings us to characterization. And you, at this juncture, you may ask, what is characterization? Of course, characterization, let me give you a definition of characterization. Characterization is the way in which a writer presents their characters in a piece of writing, or let me put it in a work of art, with a view to making them believable and convincing, right? All right, so you can see exactly what we are talking about here. All right, that's exactly what we mean by characterization. Characterization is the way in which a writer presents their characters in a work of art with a view to making them believable and convincing. All right, so that is characterization, presentation of characters, the manner in which the writer presents the characters, or in which he characterizes the agents that carry out the events in the story. All right, so a character is an agent that carries out the actions or participates in the incidents and events of the story. Now, let's begin with the first character, and that is the invisible man. This is the protagonist. You may ask, what exactly is a protagonist? All right, let's not really delve into all this. The protagonist is the central character, and in most cases, the protagonist could be the hero or the heroine, all right, of the novel. That's the major character, the central character, all right. The most important character in a work of art is the protagonist. Now, the invisible man is the narrator of the story as well as the protagonist of the novel. As a young black man, he believes he is invisible because he discovers that people refuse to notice him or regard him as a fellow citizen. Because he is black, people always view him from the perspective of his race and all the stereotypes associated with being black in a white dominated racist American society. Nobody sees his real value or identifies him as an individual who possesses certain personal qualities. All right, so you can see the invisible man, even though he plays various roles. Sometimes he's invited to speak as a speaker, and even when he is playing those roles, you still see him being degraded. In one breath, he is delivering a speech that actually mesmerizes the audience and draws their admiration, and in the next breath he becomes a victim of the racist environment. All right, so the invisible man is the narrator and the protagonist. And if we look at the the narrative technique used in the novel, it is the first person narrative technique. Now let me explain what we mean by first person narrative technique. All right, now what do we mean by first person narrative technique? Now what we mean is that the narrator is narrating the story using the first person pronouns. The first person personal pronouns such as I, me, my, mine, we, us. All right. So When a story is told, and the speaker or the narrator uses these personal pronouns, it means that the narrator is an active participant in the story he tells. Is not just a narrator, he is also a character in the story. So that is what this novel is. The Invisible Man is narrating the story from the first person point of view. All right. Now let's now uh, move to the next character, and the next character is Dr. Bledsoe. Dr. Bledsoe is the dean of the college where the narrator is schooling. It's an all-black college. Dr. Bledsoe is someone greatly admired by the narrator. The narrator regards Dr. Bledsoe as his idol, someone he admires as his role model. All right? The reason being that Dr. Bledsoe is a fellow black man, yet he has achieved great academic success. So the 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 narrator actually admires this character. All right. Now, yet ironically, the person the narrator admires and sees as a role model and ends up, expelling him from the school. So after expelling the narrator, Dr. Bledsoe gives the narrator some letters with the false assurance or in the pretext that these are letters of recommendation that will help him secure a job. But on the contrary, those letters are meant to demean the narrator. So this is eventually exposed, all right? When the narrator visits one of the trustees of the school and meets the son instead. The son becomes sympathetic after discovering the content of the letter. The trustee's son then reveals the true content, the actual content of the letter to the narrator. And so it dawns on the narrator that these are not letters of recommendation to help him secure a job. Instead, they are letters that have actually demeaned and castigated him. All right. So that is a very huge betrayal on the part of Dr. Bledsoe. All right. Okay, so let's now move on and see other characters, but not before we have wiped this to avoid any kind of confusion in the next page. Okay, the next character we are going to look at is Mr. Norton. Mr. Norton is an old white man and a co-founder of the college from which the narrator is expelled. The invisible man gets in trouble the day he drives Mr. Norton to some places around the school at the old man's request. The narrator is a student in that school, yet he also plays the role of a driver. He drives some of the important guests of the school. He helps to drive them, all right? And so when this time comes that he has to help drive Mr. Norton. Mr. Norton requests to see some places around the school. And of course, the invisible man, the narrator, obliges him and takes him around. All right. So if you read the novel, you will discover that in the process of that, of driving Mr. Norton around, uh, um, they come across a character that I will show you shortly. All right, they come across true blood. All right, true blood. Okay, so we will come back to true blood, but in the process, they come across true blood, and true blood is someone who has committed a kind of incest, you know, though he says it happened accidentally, but he find himself in a having slept with his own daughter, and his own daughter is now pregnant with his child. And so that is a kind of scandal. And the black people in that place now shun him as a result of that. Ironically, all the white people in that environment, you know, sympathize with him and give him support. And during the visit too, we find Mr. Norton giving True Bloods some gifts. All right, so that exactly is Mr. Norton, you know, the day that the narrator helps to drive him and enable him to visit places around the school. That is the day that turns out to be a sad one for the narrator, because this eventually leads to the narrator's expulsion from the school by Dr. Bledsoe. All right. Now, the next character we want to look at is, we have looked at, all right, so let me get, we have looked at the character of Mr. Norton, and let's now look at the character of Brother Jack. Brother Jack is a local leader of the Communist Party who appoints the narrator as the speaker for the community in Harlem. He invites him and, you know, supports him to speak. So from there, we have the insight into the character of the narrator, that he is recognized as an orator, as an activist as well, being a black person. So at one point, we find him joining the black community called the Brotherhood. And at the other point, we see a kind of conflict that, you know, ensues between them, and a whole lot of other things. And Brother Jack is an active member of the Brotherhood, and he is a leader of the Communist Party, and he is actively involved in the politics of that community. All right, so that is Brother Jack. Um, so let's now look at other characters uh, in the novel. All right. The next character is Grandfather. Well, Grandfather is simply the narrator's grandfather. He is remembered as someone who had expressed deep regrets uh, for his habitual loyalty to the racist white authority. He regretted that he didn't stand up for himself, that he didn't, you know, put his feet on the ground and become independent minded. He saw himself as someone who had acted slavishly, who had always, you know, agreed. He was a yes member, so to say, and this made him angry. All right, he was angry with himself, and he died being angry with himself for that regrettable stance that he took. Uh, of course, this gives us the picture that the old man realized, he realized exactly the evils of racism, and he wished that he had acted as an activist, that he had protested against the ills perpetrated by this white racist against his own people. So Then this revelation from the grandfather actually worries the narrator as he realizes that as a black man, he cannot succeed in that society unless he gains the approval of the white people. And this actually pains him much. And the kind of feeling it gives him is that it makes him angry, and he tends to become a traitor. He tends to want to rebel, to protest, all right, against the people who are meting out all these injustices against the blacks. Then the next character is True Blood. He is a black man who accidentally gets into an incestuous relationship with his own daughter. His action incurs the wrath of his fellow blacks who stigmatize him, but he is ironically supported by the white people in that community. That is True Blood, a character in Invisible Man. All right? So now let's again move on to see more of the characters in this novel. And the next character we want to look at is Mr. Emerson. Mr. Emerson is a trustee of the school in New York whom the narrator goes to see. All right? Don't forget that after being expelled from the school, he is given some letters that are supposed to be letters of commendation. He is to give these letters to some people that will help him secure a job. Unknown to him, however, they are not letters of commendation, they are letters of castigation. So when the narrator meets with Mr. Emerson's son instead, all right, the young man sympathetically reveals to the narrator the truth about the so-called letters of recommendation. Then the next character we want to look at, of course, we have looked at the character of Mr. Emerson. Now, the next character is Brockway. Brockway is a black man who works in the engine room at Liberty Pens. He is the narrator's boss for a day until the narrator is in some sort of accident in the room where the paint base is made and is taken to the factory hospital. Now, in this paint factory, we also find different things being, symbols for racism. For instance, the environment is painted in pure white, and you find that the time the invisible man, as a black man, walks into that environment, then of course you see the contrast between the pure white paint of the environment and his black color. Then the next thing we find in that particular paint factory is that they have a kind of motto, or a kind of a kind of a kind of something, an ideology, so to say, that they insist that, that white is should be given precedence, that they emphasize white. And of course, that gives us an idea that it is really something pointing to the color discrimination in that society. All right. Okay, so now let's look at the next few characters. The next character is Mary. Mary is a kind black woman in whose house the narrator rents a room where he lives until he joins the communists and moves away from there. All right, so that is Mary. The narrator lives within a short time in her house. Then the next is Brother Hambro. Brother Hambro is a well-educated communist who trains the new speakers in communist doctrine. The narrator trains with Hambro for several months before he is allowed to give public speeches again. So Brother Hambro is, a communist expert, who is a trainer for the Communist Party, all right? He trains people in eloquence, in oratory, and shows them how they can actually become uh, good or better public speakers. All right. So that is the kind of person that Brother Hambro is in this novel. All right. So a few more. The next is Mr. Clifton. I mean, Clifton is simply known as Clifton. Clifton is a strong and passionate, and if you like, charismatic young activist in the Harlem district. And the narrator is initially threatened by Clinton's presence. So Clifton is one of the activists, and of course, if you follow the story, you discover that Clifton eventually dies in the hands of the racists, and the narrator has to really organize his burial, and from there the story is getting towards a climax. A lot of other things happen thereafter that eventually leads to the narrator going underground. All right. Then the last character we are to see is Ras the Exhorter. He is a black nationalist agitator who is angry with the black men of the Communist Party because he believes they are traitors to their race. He condemns their willingness to act as puppets to the white men. All right? So that's the character Ras the Exhorter. Okay, so we have been able to look at the characters in the novel, and having exhausted uh, characterization, let's move now over to, well, we still have two more characters anyway. Let's not forget them, even though they are minor characters. But one of them is Reinhardt. Reinhardt is a con artist who takes advantage of the people of Harlem in his role. The role he plays is a gambler, is a preacher. All right. And the narrator is mistaken for Reinhardt when he disguises himself in dark glasses and a big hat, because that gives us the idea that that's the way Reinhardt always dresses. And if you look at the fact that the narrator dresses in this way only when he decides to disguise himself, he wants to escape from the hands of those who are pursuing him and who are bent on killing him. So he dresses in this way to disguise himself. But this actually is the normal dressing of Reinhardt. That shows us that he is actually a con artist, someone who is an expert in deceiving others. All right. Now, the last character is Sybil. Sybil, all right? Now, Sybil is a wife of a committee member of the Brotherhood, and the narrator sleeps with her in an attempt to get information that could help him destroy the Brotherhood. That's the time he now gets into conflict with the Brotherhood, all right? Now, Sybil, however, has no useful information for him. So that is a character in the novel. Now, don't forget that the novel is about racial discrimination by the whites against the blacks in the racist American society of the 1930s. So now let's look at the themes Now, you may ask, what exactly is theme? Let me explain what theme means. All right. A theme is a main idea or central message in a work of art. The theme is essentially what the novel is about, or what a reader is likely to learn from the story. All right. Now, if you have read a novel and someone asks you what is the novel about, you are likely to tell him or her the themes of the novel. All right. So one of the themes is racial discrimination. Racial discrimination. That's one of the themes. And as a black man living in a racist society, the invisible man is denied the basic rights of a citizen. That's what the story is about. He becomes invisible because he is not recognized as a citizen of the American society as the white members of that society are recognized. The novel is a depiction of the oppression and deprivation faced by the black Africans in the racist American society of the 20th century, specifically the 1930s, all right? Then the next theme is lack of identity or invisibility. Now, throughout the novel, we find the young black man, the invisible man, searching for his identity, totally at a loss as to who he is. As far as he is concerned, he is totally invisible to the society, since nobody in that society takes note of him or treats him as a human being. So you can see that, there is a loss of identity. Now, one of the incidents in the college where the narrator is schooling is quite shocking. All right. Incidentally, he gives a speech on that occasion and is supposed to be treated with dignity. Eventually, he is brought to a place where the black students there, especially the boys, they are made to dress up only in boxers, and then they are subjected to a situation where they've just become objects of mockery, all right, for the white guests. So that's the kind of treatment the blacks uh, are made to receive in that society. So as a result of all this, there is a crisis of identity. There is a loss of identity. And that is what makes the invisible man invisible psychologically and in various ramifications, in the way things are handled in that society. He is not given a place of prominence. In other words, you find that just like the grandfather regretted before he died, he was compelled by the circumstances in that environment only to say yes to whatever the white authorities said. And he couldn't carve out an identity for himself. And this also affected the psyche of the narrator, that he himself is confused and he is angry at the same time. that drives him to a point where he wants to become an activist, he wants to become a protester, he wants to become a rebel, a traitor. He wants to rebel against the oppressive racist authorities. All right? So that is one of the themes that we find in this novel. Now, racism as a barrier to personal identity, well, that's related. You know, the novel paints a picture of a racist society where being a black man means being invisible or without any personal identity. Well, there are other related themes. You can also look at racism as a barrier to personal dreams and ambitions, because you find the narrator, you know, actually he discovers himself as a talented person, but then even his talent and his gifts and what he's capable of doing do not really find any space to find fulfillment. So you discover that it is a racist society. For the black man is a society that actually, you know, only helps to kill his or her dream. This is similar to what we find in a poem titled Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. Now, if you search the description section below, you will find my analysis of Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. All right, so that also is a portrayal of the racism in the American society of that period. Let's say the 1950s in the case of Caged Bird or thereabout. Okay, then of course there is the the play drama titled Fences by who now? By August Wilson. You will also find my analysis of Fences, a play by August Wilson. It also handles the issues of racism and racial discrimination and oppression of the blacks in a white-dominated American society. All right, so there are a number of themes, all right, such as, you know, uh, shattered dreams, if you like, because, of course, in a racist environment uh, portrayed as it is in this novel, you don't expect any black individual to have his or her dreams realized. It is all about shattered dreams, and this is evident in the regrets of the old man, the narrator's grandfather, who is so angry with himself that he is angry with himself to the point of death because he couldn't fulfill his dream. The racist society prevented him from fulfilling his dream. And this, what we find in the frustration that characterizes the life of the invisible man is a carryover from the memories of his grandfather. He realizes that as a black man, he cannot attain to any reasonable heights unless he gains the approval of the racist white authorities. And for him to gain their approval, of course, he has to shrink to the level of a slave. And of course, even when he is totally invisible, of course, he is still not recognized. So it is almost impossible for a black man to really realize his dreams or his ambition in that repressive, racist society. So there are a number of themes in this novel, and of course, it is important that we explore these various themes. But for today's video, this is where we are going to draw the curtain. I hope you have actually gained something from this video, from what we have discussed so far. I hope you have learned quite a lot. If you have, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so that whenever a new video is uploaded, you will be instantly notified. To really show that you enjoyed the video, make sure you like the video and share the video with your friends and relations. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. I want to say a big thank you to all of you out there for being part of today's episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye bye for now and remain blessed.